The war had been over for 11 years. 11 years of silence, of rebuilt stations, of carefully negotiated trade routes and cautious diplomatic handshakes across star systems that had once been scorched black by cannon fire. 11 years of the Galactic Council congratulating itself on surviving the Keth invasion, the most devastating military assault in recorded interstellar history. What they preferred not to remember, when they raised their commemorative glasses and signed their anniversary accords, was who had actually saved them. High Chancellor Zareth of the Galactic Council remembered. He remembered because remembering was the only honest thing left to him. The message arrived on a Tuesday, which meant nothing to anyone except the humans, who still marked time by a blue-green planet that most of the galaxy could not locate on a star chart without assistance. It was brief. It was, characteristically, blunt. The debt is being called. We are coming. Commander Darian Voss, United Earth Fleet Command. Zareth read it 3 times in his private chamber. His secondary hearts, he had 4, performed an arrhythmic stutter that his physician would have found alarming. He set down the message tablet with the slow, deliberate care of a being trying very hard not to drop something. 11 years ago, when the Keth warships had broken through the outer rim and the Council's combined fleets had shattered like glass against their void shields, it had been humanity that answered the emergency broadcast. Not because they were treaty-bound. Not because they had been asked nicely. But because a small, young species from a single unremarkable world had looked at the math, 40 billion lives in the path of the Keth advance, and decided that the math was unacceptable. They had bled for the galaxy. They had lost 60,000 soldiers, 7 capital ships, and an entire generation of their finest military minds at the Battle of Soren's Gate alone. And they had asked for only one thing in return. When we call, Commander Darian Voss had said, standing in this very chamber 11 years ago, blood still drying on the collar of her uniform, her left arm in a military brace, her eyes carrying the specific exhausted clarity of someone who had not slept in 4 days, you answer. No questions. No committees. No 3-week deliberation sessions. You answer. The Council had agreed. Of course they had agreed. Humanity had just saved their civilization. And then the years passed, and the Council breathed easier, and some members began privately speculating, hopefully, shamefully, that perhaps humanity had forgotten. Perhaps they would never call. Perhaps the debt would simply fade, the way debts do when the creditor is far away and the debtor is busy and comfortable. Zareth had known better. He had looked into Darian Voss's eyes. That woman did not forget anything. The human fleet arrived at Council Space 3 days later. Zareth stood at the observation bay of Council Station Primaris and watched them come through the transit corridor, a disciplined line of warships emerging from jump space with the unhurried confidence of beings who had never once doubted they would be permitted to enter. No hailing frequencies. No formal identification broadcasts. They simply came, because they had been promised they could. 42 ships. Smaller than the armada they had brought to Soren's Gate, but newer. Sharper. The hulls caught the starlight differently than they had 11 years ago, harder angles, darker alloys, weapons arrays that the Council's own military analysts had already begun photographing frantically and whispering about in urgent, worried tones. Humanity had not been idle. Commander Darian Voss's flagship, the UEFS Covenant, a name that the translation algorithms rendered with a weight that made Zareth uncomfortable, docked at the primary berth without ceremony. The airlock opened. Voss walked through. She was older. Her dark hair had gone silver at the temples. The arm that had been in a brace was now bare and moved freely, though Zareth's briefing documents had noted it was reconstructed, organic materials woven around a titanium lattice, because human medicine had advanced considerably in 11 years, and human stubbornness had not advanced at all because it was already at its maximum possible value. She walked like someone who owned the floor she stood on. Not arrogantly. Simply with the absolute, untroubled certainty of someone who had already done the calculation and knew they were correct. High Chancellor. Her voice was the same. Calm. Direct. Carrying the particular quietness of a person who had learned that soft voices make people lean in, and people who lean in listen harder. Commander Voss. Zareth spread his upper hands in the Council's formal greeting. The Galactic Council honors its word. We are prepared to hear your request. Voss looked at him for a moment. Something moved behind her eyes, not unkindness, but a very precise and patient assessment. It isn't a request, she said. It's a debt. There's a difference. Zareth felt the chamber shift. The council aides along the walls, 20 beings from 14 different species, went very still. The distinction Voss was drawing was small. It was also enormous. Of course, Zareth said carefully. Tell us what you need. What she needed was, on the surface, simple. The Dravari Collective, a mid-rim civilization of 7 billion souls, was being systematically dismantled by a corporate extraction syndicate called the Venith Group. The Venith Group held 17 council charter licenses and had powerful friends in the outer trade committees. The Dravari had been petitioning the council for aid for 4 years. The council had been deliberating. The Dravari were losing approximately 40,000 citizens per year to displacement, forced labor, and what the euphemistic council reports called resource acquisition incidents. For years, Voss said. She was not raising her voice. She never raised her voice. 4 years of petitions. 4 years of committees. Meanwhile, people are dying on a schedule. The Venith Group has legal standing under. I know what they have legal standing under. Voss placed a data tablet on the council table. This is a full audit of Venith Group operations, conducted by Earth Intelligence over the past 18 months. Slave labor. Ecological weapons. 14 council officials on their payment ledger. She tapped the tablet once. That last one is going to be awkward for you. I'm sorry about that. Not very sorry, but a little. Silence. What we are calling, Voss continued, is this: the Galactic Council will revoke the Venith Group's charter licenses within 72 hours, dispatch a humanitarian protection fleet to Dravari space within 1 week, and open full criminal proceedings against every official named in that document. In return, Earth considers the debt paid, and we go back to being friendly neighbors who occasionally argue about transit tariffs. And if the council cannot meet these terms within your timeframe, one of the senior council members asked. His name was Prithis, and he had been, Zareth happened to know, on the Venith payment ledger for 6 years. Voss looked at him. Just looked, the way a mountain looks at a stone that has rolled against its base. Councillor Prithis, she said pleasantly, I have 42 warships in your transit corridor, a complete intelligence file on your financial history with the Venith Group, and the legal right to be here granted by every senior member of this council 11 years ago, witnessed, sealed, and non-revocable. She tilted her head slightly. Is that a genuine question, or were you hoping I hadn't done my research? Prithis said nothing. Prithis would, in fact, resign his seat by end of week. His physician would cite health reasons. No one would publicly disagree. The council voted in 61 hours. It was, by a significant margin, the fastest vote in council history on any matter more complex than a lunch menu. The Venith Group's licenses were revoked. The protection fleet was dispatched. Criminal proceedings were opened, genuinely opened, not the slow-walked, quietly buried kind, but the kind with independent prosecutors and public records and council journalists who had somehow already received copies of the intelligence file before the vote was even finalized. Humanity, it turned out, understood how information moved. Voss stood at the airlock of the Covenant as her crew prepared for departure, and Zareth came to see her off. It was not protocol. He came because he wanted to, which was perhaps the most honest thing he had done in 11 years. You could have asked for more, he said. We would have given it. Voss considered this with the air of someone who had already considered it thoroughly, at length, at 3 in the morning, in the way that humans apparently did all of their most important thinking. "We didn't do what we did at Soren's Gate for payment," she said. "We did it because it was right." She picked up her jacket from the rack beside the airlock, shrugged it on. "But debts matter. Promises matter. If you let people forget that you mean what you say, they stop believing you when it counts." She looked at him one more time, that same steady, measuring look that had not changed in 11 years. 7 billion people on Dravari get to wake up tomorrow, she said. "That's what we asked for. That's enough." The airlock closed. The Covenant undocked with quiet, unhurried precision, and the 42 ships of the human fleet turned together in the dark, not threatening, not rushing, simply leaving, the way beings leave when they have done what they came to do and have nowhere else to be. Zareth watched them go. Somewhere in the station behind him, he could hear the scramble of aides and analysts and committee members trying to understand what had just happened and what it meant and whether they should be frightened. He could have told them. It meant that humanity kept its word. All of it. Even the parts that cost something. Especially the parts that cost something. He watched the last human ship fold into jump space and disappear, and he thought that 42 warships was not what had made the Council vote in 61 hours. What had made the Council vote in 61 hours was the absolute, unshakable, galaxy-wide certainty that Commander Darian Voss had looked at the math, 7 billion lives, and found it, once again, completely unacceptable. And that humanity, when it found the math unacceptable, did something about it. That was the thing the galaxy had learned at Soren's Gate. That was the thing the galaxy kept forgetting, and kept being reminded of. That was the thing that made Chancellor's secondary heart stutter, and Council's vote in 61 hours, and corporate syndicates quietly begin reviewing their legal exposure on a Tuesday morning, before the human fleet had even finished docking. Not the guns. Never just the guns. The certainty.